Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time, there was a little boy named Jack. He lived in a small village at the base of a mountain, where he would play all day with his friends. One day, while playing in the woods, Jack stumbled upon a strange beanstalk that seemed to reach the sky. Being curious, he climbed the beanstalk and discovered a giant's castle in the clouds. The giant, who was away, had a golden harp that sang beautiful songs, a magic hen that laid golden eggs, and many other treasures. Jack knew he had to bring back some of those treasures to his poor family. He steals the singing harp, magic hen, and some gold from the giant. But the giant discovered the theft and come down to Jack's village. Angry giant threatened to destroy the village if the thief does not come forward. Jack owned up to his crime, and the giant forgave him. The giant gave Jack the treasures to keep and taught him a valuable lesson about the consequences of stealing. Jack lived happily ever after with his family, who never had to worry about money again, and he visited the giant often as a friend. Sarah and Peter's Sweet Adventure. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Sarah. She loved nothing more than playing outside in her garden, where she would spend hours tending to her flowers and watching the butterflies flutter by. One day, while picking berries in the forest, Sarah met a talking rabbit named Peter. Peter was very friendly, and he told Sarah that there was a magical kingdom hidden deep in the forest, where the trees were made of candy and the rivers flowed with chocolate milk. Sarah was so excited at the thought of visiting such a wonderful place that she decided to follow Peter on an adventure to find the kingdom. As they walked deeper into the forest, they met all sorts of friendly creatures who helped them on their journey. They crossed a bridge made of gingerbread, ate cake with the caterpillars, and reached to a castle made of candy. They were greeted by the queen of the kingdom, who was kind and generous and gave them a tour of the kingdom. Sarah and Peter enjoyed their visit and had a great time together. They promised to come back to the kingdom again soon, and then Sarah returned home, with a basket of candy and a heart full of wonderful memories. Felix and the Golden Apple. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there was a clever young fox named Felix. Felix lived in the forest with his family and friends, and he loved to play and explore the many paths that wound through the trees. One day, while out on a walk, Felix stumbled upon a clearing where he found a beautiful golden apple. Being very curious, Felix decided to take the apple back to his den to show it to his family. When Felix's family saw the apple, they all agreed it was the most beautiful thing they had ever seen. They decided it would be best to keep it safe in the den and show it to their friends as well. However, one of Felix's friends suggested to plant the apple seed and grow apple tree for all to enjoy. Felix thought that was a great idea, so he dug a hole in the forest and planted the seed. To everyone's surprise, a great apple tree grew from the seed and produced more golden apples, enough for the whole forest to enjoy. From that day on, Felix and his family were known as the kind and generous foxes who had brought such a wonderful gift to the forest, and they all lived happily ever after. Sir Jack and the Dragon. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there lived a kind and generous king who ruled over his people with fairness and compassion. One day, a dragon appeared in the kingdom, causing destruction and terrorizing the citizens. The king knew he had to do something to protect his people, so he called upon the bravest knights in the land to defeat the dragon. But none of them were successful. One day, a young and inexperienced squire named Jack decided to try his hand at defeating the dragon. He was determined to save the kingdom and its people, even though he was not a knight yet. Jack's friends and family tried to discourage him, but he was determined to go through with his plan. Jack set out on his journey, armed with nothing but his courage and a small sword. When he finally found the dragon's cave, he was terrified, but he knew he had to go through with it. He crept into the cave and came face to face with the dragon. The dragon breathed fire, but Jack was quick and was able to dodge the flames. He then bravely lunged forward with his sword and killed the dragon. The kingdom was saved and the people rejoiced. Jack was hailed as a hero and was knighted by the king. From that day on, he was known as Sir Jack, the Dragon Slayer. He went on to have many more adventures and always put the safety and well-being of the kingdom and its people first. The end. Peter and the Golden Key. Once upon a time, in a beautiful forest, there was a little rabbit named Peter. Peter was a very curious rabbit and loved to explore the forest. One day, while he was out exploring, he came across a strange object that he had never seen before. It was a shiny golden key. Peter couldn't wait to show the key to his friends and family, so he hopped as fast as he could back to his burrow. He showed the key to his mother and father, but they didn't know what it was for. Peter's friends, who were also rabbits, didn't know what it was either. Determined to find out what the key was for, Peter set out on a journey to ask the wise old owl who lived in a tree at the edge of the forest. The wise old owl listened to Peter's story and told him that the key was for a secret treasure chest that was hidden deep in the forest. Excited about the possibility of finding treasure, Peter set out with his friends to find the chest. They searched high and low, through dense thickets and over rocky hills. Just when they were about to give up, they came across a clearing, and in the center of the clearing was a big old tree with a chest sitting at the base of it. Peter's heart raced as he inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The chest opened, and inside they found the most beautiful treasure they had ever seen. There were glittering jewels, shiny gold coins, and delicious treats. They all shared the treasure and had a big feast together. From that day on, they went on many more adventures together, but none ever compared to the excitement of finding the treasure. The end. Cinderella. Once upon a time, in a far-off kingdom, there was a little girl named Cinderella. She lived with her stepmother and stepsisters, who treated her poorly and made her do all the chores. Cinderella was sad and lonely, but she never lost hope that one day her life would change for the better. One day, the king of the kingdom announced that there would be a grand ball to find a bride for his son, the prince. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters were allowed to go to the ball, but they forbid Cinderella to go, telling her she was not good enough. Cinderella was heartbroken, but she decided not to give up. She went to her fairy godmother, a kind old woman who lived in the forest. The fairy godmother knew how much Cinderella wanted to go to the ball, so she decided to help her. With a wave of her magic wand, the fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a beautiful carriage, mice into horses, and a rat into a coachman. She then turned Cinderella's rags into a beautiful ball gown. The fairy godmother told Cinderella that the spell would last until midnight, after that everything would turn back to normal. Cinderella went to the ball, and everyone was amazed at how beautiful she looked. The prince immediately fell in love with her, but Cinderella had to leave before the clock struck 12. The prince searched the whole kingdom for his mysterious lady, but he couldn't find her. The next day, the prince decided to try the glass slipper on every girl in the kingdom, in the hope of finding his true love. When the stepsisters tried on the glass slipper, it was too small for them. But when Cinderella tried it on, it fit perfectly. The prince knew she was the one he had been looking for, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Tom and the Unicorn. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a little boy named Tom. Tom was very curious and loved to explore the nearby forest. He had heard many stories about the forest and the creatures that lived there. He had always wanted to see them with his own eyes. One day, Tom decided to go on an adventure in the forest. He packed a bag with food and water, and set off early in the morning. He walked for hours, admiring the tall trees, the colorful flowers, and the chirping birds. He saw many different animals, but he had not seen any of the creatures he had heard stories about. Just as he was about to give up, Tom heard a rustling in the bushes. He cautiously approached and peered through the leaves, and there he saw a beautiful unicorn. The unicorn was grazing on the grass and did not seem to notice Tom. Tom was in awe. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his life. He slowly stepped closer, but the unicorn looked up and saw him. Tom was afraid that it would run away, but instead, the unicorn came closer to him and nuzzled him with its nose. Tom was overjoyed and knew that this would be the greatest adventure of his life. Tom spent the whole day with the unicorn, and it showed him the hidden wonders of the forest. They saw the secret waterfall, the magical tree, and even met some friendly fairies. Tom had never felt so happy and content in his life. When the day was over, Tom said goodbye to his new friend and promised to come back and visit. He returned to the village and told everyone of his amazing adventure and the unicorn that he had met. Everyone in the village was amazed and couldn't wait to hear more about Tom's adventure. The end. Prince George and the Golden Apple. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there was a young prince named George. He was kind-hearted, but also quite lazy and never wanted to do anything that required hard work. One day, the king, his father, became ill, and the only way for him to be cured was to find the legendary golden apple that was said to have magical healing powers. The king ordered his son, Prince George, to set out on a journey to find the golden apple. At first, Prince George was hesitant, as he didn't want to leave his comfortable life at the palace. But, seeing his father's condition, he finally agreed to go. On his journey, Prince George encountered many challenges and obstacles. He had to cross treacherous mountains, navigate dark forests, and even outsmart clever bandits. But despite all the difficulties, he kept going, driven by his desire to save his father. Finally, after many weeks of traveling, Prince George reached the Garden of the Golden Apple. There, he found the tree bearing the magical fruit, guarded by a fierce dragon. The prince was afraid, but he knew that he couldn't give up now. He gathered all of his courage, and with a sword and shield, he fought the dragon and successfully retrieved the golden apple. Prince George brought the golden apple back to the palace, and his father was cured. From that day on, Prince George was no longer lazy and became a brave and courageous prince. He continued to go on many more adventures, always putting the well-being of his kingdom and his people first. The end. The Brave Squire Jack and the Dragon. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there was a kind and generous king who ruled over a peaceful kingdom. One day, a terrible dragon began terrorizing the kingdom, burning down villages and scaring the people. The king knew he had to do something to protect his kingdom and its people, so he put out a call for brave knights to come and slay the dragon. Many knights came from far and wide, but none were able to defeat the dragon. One day, a young and unassuming squire named Jack decided to try his hand at slaying the dragon. He had no armor or weapons, but he did have a clever mind and a strong heart. Jack set out to the dragon's lair, and using his wits, he was able to outsmart the dragon and slay it. The king was overjoyed and grateful to Jack, and he made him a knight on the spot. Jack returned home to the kingdom, where he was hailed as a hero and lived happily ever after. The end. Benny and the Enchanted Wishing Tree. Once upon a time, in a magical forest, there lived a young bunny named Benny. Benny was very curious and loved to explore the forest. One day, while exploring, he stumbled upon a mysterious old tree. Benny had heard stories about the old tree being enchanted, and he was determined to find out if it was true. Benny hopped around the tree, examining it closely. He noticed a small door at the base of the tree and decided to see what was inside. To his surprise, he found a beautiful garden filled with colorful flowers and delicious fruits. As he hopped around the garden, he met a friendly fairy named Flora. Flora told Benny that she was the guardian of the tree and that the tree was indeed enchanted. She explained that the tree was a wishing tree and that if Benny made a wish, it would come true. Benny thought for a moment and then made his wish: "I wish for all the bunnies in the forest to have enough food to eat." Flora smiled and granted his wish. From that day on, Benny and his bunny friends never went hungry again. Benny learned that with a kind heart and a selfless wish, he could make a big difference in the lives of others. The end. Lila and the Little Bird. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there was a little girl named Lila who loved to play outside. One day, while Lila was playing in the forest, she stumbled upon a tiny, injured bird. Lila knew she had to help the bird, so she picked it up gently and brought it home. She made a little nest for the bird and took care of it every day. She fed it, kept it warm, and sang to it until it was well enough to fly again. The bird was very grateful to Lila and wanted to repay her kindness. One day, Lila was lost in the forest and couldn't find her way home. She was very scared and alone. Just then, the little bird flew down and offered to help her find her way home. Lila was overjoyed, and the bird guided her back to her house. Lila learned that a small act of kindness can have a big impact and that sometimes, even the smallest creatures can be heroes. The end. Timmy and the Explorer's House. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a young boy named Timmy. Timmy was always curious about the world and loved to explore. He would spend hours wandering around the village and the surrounding countryside, looking for new and exciting things to discover. One day, Timmy found a small, abandoned house on the edge of the village. He had never seen it before and was immediately intrigued. He went inside and found that the house was filled with strange and wonderful objects. There were old books, pictures, and even a telescope. Timmy was fascinated by all of the things in the house, and he spent hours looking at them and learning about the world. He realized that the house belonged to an old man who was once a great explorer and scientist. Timmy was inspired by the old man's stories and decided that he too wanted to be an explorer when he grew up. He spent the rest of his childhood exploring the village and the surrounding countryside, always looking for new and exciting things to discover. In the end, Timmy became a great explorer and scientist, just like the old man. He traveled the world, discovering new places and making important scientific discoveries.